Hey, hey, thank you so much for joining another episode of Celeste the Therapist podcast. My name is Celeste. I'm a therapist, and I'm going to have Jermaine introduce himself to you all.
Hi, I'm Jermaine Morris. I'm a certified coach and consultant based out of California. I have a practice which is based around a DISC assessment, which is basically a test that shows how an individual operates in regards to solving problems, interacting with people, pace we like to work at, how we follow procedures. It's a great tool to use to kind of show how an individual, how we do the world. So,
Mhm.
potential blind spots in behavior, best and least effective ways to communicate. It's just a really good tool that can be used professionally, personally, all that stuff.
Yeah, that's good. And for people that are new here, Jermaine and I do a segment called Getting Your Mind Right. And the goal is to just kind of help people look at what's going on. And one of the things that Jermaine likes to say is like self awareness without judgment. And for people that are new here, because there's always new listeners, can you just explain why that's important to be self aware, but especially not judging yourself?
Yeah, so it's important that if you come into how we behave through the lens of good or bad, right or wrong, um, it can hurt the process. So if we just start with just what are we? Is it if I'm 5'10", I'm 5'10". I'm not short, I'm not tall. If I weigh 200 pounds, I'm 200 pounds. Like now, if you decide you're 200 pounds and you want to be 180, okay, then there's some steps to work in getting 180. But when we attach the guilt and the shame and the resentment and the judgment, we create new problems along with whatever the original challenge we were dealing with to begin with. So I like to focus on let's just be aware of who we are, how we operate, what challenges we may potentially be faced with, and then what's the best way to go about addressing those challenges.
Yeah, I like to new problem. You create new problems and a lot of stagnation
Yeah.
because you start to really feel stuck in all of the emotions and not even get to the problem, which is hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
So one of the things that we do, and for people that enjoy like listening to Jermaine, we have a ton of episodes. If you go to celestetherapist.com/podcast, and there's a link that will take you to the different episodes we have where we talk about a lot of different things. But today we're going to talk about breaking old habits. I mean, I feel like in some capacity we talk about it all the time, but particularly Jermaine likes this topic during this season. Tell people why you think people tend to really be a little bit more intentional around this time of year.
Yeah, so, tie it into the idea of, like, spring cleaning. We clean all year long. Like, we don't wait till one type of year to actually start doing some laundry or something. But there's a concept of spring cleaning where we take an extra steps to clear out the attic, clear out the basement, to clear out the garage, to put away winter clothes for the summer clothes. We get an intentional boost of energy to start addressing those things. Well, what I found is that spring is kind of joke before is that it's almost like the second coming of our New Year's resolution. There's a second wave of making those changes that may or may not have happened January 1st. But there's a wave of intentionality that when spring cleaning comes, not only do we do it in our homes, but we do it in our lives. And so I've been getting quite a few people who are that's the stage that they're in. That's the season that they're trying to clean out um, old relationships, new financial practices, different ways of doing things. So that's been coming up, hit my radar a lot lately.
Oh, that's nice. And when I think about the time frame, so just same way you just talked about January 1st, like anybody who follows me knows I believe change can happen at any point, but I do understand the extra boost when the whole like environment is like talking about change. It's kind of an added bonus to what you're already doing if you're doing stuff for yourself. Same thing with spring. If you like Jermaine said, you can always like clean and do what you need to do, but it does feel like an added boost. Just like the sun when it's out, if it's not out, it's like I don't really feel like getting up and doing much. But when the sun's like beaming first thing in the morning, something about the sun just gives me this added like I'm ready to like go out and conquer the day. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, very very much. I think that a lot of us are on the fence. So when it comes to motivation or drive, or a lot of us are really just kind of we're one thing away from springing out of the bed or hitting the snooze button. So, so a lot of us are right on the fence. And so if you happen to look, if the sun is beaming, that's just enough push to get out of bed and spring out. If it's a little overcast, that may be just enough to pull the covers over our head. So those external things definitely do affect us.
It's so true. Now, for as far as like habits, I would say to people, we have some form of habit, whether they work well or not work well, and they're built over time, whether intentionally or not or unintentionally. Our brain, it loves structure, and it will create like a lot of habits that may not work for us in a structured way because that's all it knows. But I do believe we can like reframe that and change that. And what would that look like for people as they're looking at their habits and trying to like change some of the ones that aren't really working well for them?
So one of the first things is can you identify what the habit is? So if there's always more month at the end of your money, like if you always look at the it's always the pocketbook is always tight, but we're not mindful of our spending habits. Okay, so can we look at how we spend money? Like what is the way? Do we a lot of impulse buying? Do we are we preparers? We just buy stuff that is good in idea and theory, but not really practical for our lives. We don't need those 37 jars of pickles, getting ready for D-Day. Like, what are the habits that we have with spending? Okay, these are my patterns, these are my habits. Now that I've identified those, what changes can I do for and then start saving money?
And the habits that, and this is a self-awareness part without judgment, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of the habits that we have, you mentioned D-Day. I've known some people to get over hyper aware of like the war and things that are happening and make impulsive buys because of the fear, right? So some
Yes.
habits are based off of like what's happening in the world. Some could be just childhood. Some could be because you have survived your entire life. So like when from your experience, like sometimes people don't even know why they are doing what they're doing or where it stemmed from. But these are some of the areas. Can you think of any other areas I left out that may have kind of contributed to some habits that may not work as well for people?
Yeah, so if you so childhood is always, ground zero. So if you so take a step back. So advertise if anybody's ever heard me talk before, we sidebar and we use analogies. So sidebar was the principle for advertisement in this country is the logic of fear safe. So I'm going to present something that you should be afraid of, and then I'm going to sell you the solution to the fear I just gave you. So that's the basic premise of advertising in this country. So regardless of the commercial, oh my God, what are we gonna do for dinner? Here's stovetop stuffing. You know what I mean? Like it's to the rescue.
That makes
So
so much sense.
yes,
A lot of sense, yeah.
yeah. So now you'll never look at commercials the same. It's what are we gonna do for breakfast? What are we gonna do for vacation? And then there's a solution. So that's the basic premise of advertising is a fear safe. So if you've grown up in that type of energy where you're constantly being inundated with what to be afraid of, your behaviors will create a fear and then a behavior that will create a solution. So maybe we grew up in a lower income situation. So you're constantly fearful of the lights being turned off. You're constantly fearful of not having enough food. So you put yourself in a situation. These are people who never spend a dime. Like they just try to save everything, or they're working 50, 60 hours a week, constantly trying to acquire because in their mind, they're afraid, even though they may be completely financially okay, they're afraid that one day the light's going to get turned off, even though that's not maybe practical in their day-to-day world. We may do things that we think are solutions, or we do things to try to preempt previous trauma. If you go back to childhood, if you're used to chaotic environments, you may be in a chaotic environment, or you may have grown up in one, but that's not your current situation, but you have a default for how you deal with them. And if you're unable to practice that default, you can create a chaotic environment just to practice your default mechanism.
I just want to say, because that's something I've been talking to people a lot about, what Jermaine is saying. Growing up in a chaotic environment, And maybe you have created a lot of stability in your life, but you may find yourself still thriving off of chaos. It's like, how does somebody thrive off of chaos? It's a real thing. It's not like it's not logic, believe me, because if we were thinking about it in a logical way, we would be like, wait, that doesn't make sense. It's a lot of emotions, a lot of habits around chaos, right? Where you will put yourself in situations. And when I share that with people, they start to look at their life differently. I'm like, oh wow, I can see how I involved myself in this that didn't have nothing to do with me. Now I'm stressed
Yeah.
out about it, or X, Y, and Z. So I just kind of wanted to like highlight that piece that you said, because I feel like I've been talking about that a lot with people.
Yeah, I've known people who are they find conflict everywhere. Like every time you talk to it, man, I got into with so and so at the job. So and so looked at me at the store. So and so said something to me at the mailbox. You're like, what are you doing that everybody's picking fights with you? And you don't realize that their default is maybe they've always felt challenged. They always have a chip on their shoulder. They always feel like they're being tested. So they'll go out and find an opportunity to be tested, or they'll see something that's not there or create something that's not there. You're staring at somebody, waiting for them to stare back just so you can say, what are you staring at? And then you get into it at the post office just so you can come home and say, somebody tried me at the post office. Like, like, like we'll create these patterns of behavior because we are so used to conflict that even if there's nobody to have a conflict with, we'll figure out a way to get into one just because it's a pattern that we're used to.
And my heart goes out to people that live that life, because they don't recognize that their mind is looking for it, because that's the way that they've kind of been conditioned and don't see it clearly. So your mind is looking for the same evidence that's in your mind that you're thinking about that you haven't reconciled with. And so that's why it's kind of like, how could somebody consistently create conflict? Is because your mind can frame it a certain way where it makes sense. Kind of like if you look at 69 one way, it may look like 96 the other way,
Yes.
depending on the angle that you're looking at. And so some people, their angle or their lens on life revolves around them being a victim, because at one point in their life, I really believe that people were victims, and they've just never reconciled to kind of understand the power that they have to create change in their life.
Yeah, and just sticking in that vein, if you can justify conflict everywhere, then you can justify your original victimization. So if you believe that you were victimized just because the world is horrible and people are always looking to fight and people are always looking to mess with you, then you can kind of justify why whatever is happening is happening. But if you can't, and then you have to isolate whatever this was, maybe there's a particular person you don't want to address. That's maybe the person that victimized you, or maybe you're a therapist, you go down those rabbit holes. But if there may be a particular conversation you would need to have with somebody in your mind, but if you can say that everybody's that way, you don't have to have it. You know what I mean? Like if there's that makes sense. Like
It makes a lot of sense.
yeah, so we can avoid certain situations by just instead of saying my boss, I had a crappy boss, we just say all bosses are crappy. I didn't have a bad teacher, all teachers are bad. We can kind of justify relationships or maybe the issues with our parents or whatever. We can kind of do that, as well as we don't have to take responsibility for certain things.
Yeah.
If that's the way the world is,
hmm
it can't be me.
hmm
'Cause that's how everybody is.
And not taking responsibility or accountability for your life, the things in your life, it creates a way where you tend to have a hard time functioning in life when you
Yeah.
aren't able to see your power or take any kind of accountability. That's a really hard way to live. So
That's why I think that the self-awareness without judgment is so important, because if I can look at maybe some of my problematic behaviors,
hmm
I can, and whether those involve another person or not, I could have
hmm
some self-sabotaging behaviors that I don't involve. I don't draft anybody else. Or I may be combative with other people. Like I may just have these things. I may have a short temper. I may be insecure about stuff. Whatever those things are that's about me. If I can identify those things and address those challenges, I'm behind the wheel. Like this is something I'm in control of. But as long as it's everybody else, then I'm just the victim to the seasons. Like it's raining or it's not. They're nice or they're not. And for people who are in that mentality, it's usually always raining.
I know. And
Yeah.
yeah. So that's good. I'm glad I had paused on that part because I think that's important. So, we're talking about the bad habits piece,
Yeah.
and the first step is really identifying, which is essentially when you go to the hospital, that's what they need to figure out what's the issue. And so it's so funny because sometimes people don't like, they'll be struggling with something, but they don't, not funny, but they don't even want to know what it is because they're like, it could be bad. I was like, well, let's just figure it out.
Yeah.
It's interesting how our mind will justify any dysfunction that we want to stay in. But identifying can be a grieving process. I just want to say that I know it's not
Yes.
always easy to identify because then you have to face the react what's happening right now,
Yeah.
and that can be hard. So that's one of the reasons why I think people may struggle with that identity piece, is because identifying piece is because of what comes with it. Like, what's the follow up? What's the action? Like, once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Exactly. That's the key. Because once I acknowledge it, now I'm accountable to do something with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
As long as I act like I can't see it, as long as I just, keep stepping over that bolt in the rug like there ain't nothing up under there, then I can just go about my day. I'll vacuum around it. I put a chair over it. As long as I act like I can't see it, I can act like I didn't see it. But the second that I acknowledge it, now that requires acknowledgement leads to action.
Mhm.
So once I've acknowledged it, now there's an action step that's required of me. And however I feel about that may be why I either A, look the other way, or B, distract myself to act like it's put
And,
something else in front of it.
and I want to also say that even though we say act like it's not there, just know your system knows, whether it's your past trauma, whatever it is that you're not dealing with. It's not that it goes away. It can stay dormant in your system. Energy is transferable in that way. Like the things that you've gone through that affect you, it could affect the way you decide to like go for that next job or go do whatever you're doing. So that's the hard part about mental health, is that it's so complex, and the things that you may think you're ignoring or pretending that's not happening, it may show up in all different areas of your life: relationships, financial, the way you eat, the way you sleep,
Yeah.
right? Like, so the stigmatization of mental health is baffling to me because it literally can show up anywhere when we're not like facing it.
Yeah. So if you took the equivalent of like I think it was universal, like a pressure washer, you hook it
Mhm.
up to a hose, it just blow. If you clean the side of your house or clean the cement, whatever, all the amount of water that's required and all the amount of pressure that's required for it to function properly. Well, for all those things that we have issues that are growing up in our past, imagine all those are almost like little kinks in the hose. So you can act like it's not there, but what it does is it decreases the amount of water that can
Yeah.
come out of the hose. So if you got one of those, if you got 10 of those, if you got 20 of those, by the time you get to what you're trying to do, there's no pressure and there's no water to do the things that you need to do in your life. So you're trying to figure out why it takes so much energy to wash this sidewalk off, because you got a
Mhm.
drizzle of water, because all these kinks in the hose are sapping the pressure, the power in which you need to get stuff done. So you hear people, I'm tired all the time. Everything exhausts me. That just sounds tiring. Like it
Yeah.
just because there's no water and there's no pressure.
Wow,
Because
that's good.
so when we go back and address these things, we're taking the kinks out of the hose. So now for
Mhm.
whatever it is that we need to do, we've got power, we've got pressure, we've got water, and we can operate at a high functioning area.
I love this.
Yeah. So
Um,
when you act like it's not there, you can act like those kinks aren't there if you want to, but the end result's going to be whatever you're trying to pressure wash is just not going to happen.
and taking time out to get the kinks out is gonna take some time, but the other side of it, you're not working as hard and as long to like wash what you're trying to wash,
Yeah.
because now it's functioning the way it's supposed to function. It's not like it operates on its own. You still got to put in work, but the work you're doing is not going to be the same kind of like equity and sweat that you're doing
Exactly.
without it.
And for
Wow,
some
that's
of
good.
us, we have a 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 year hose. So there's a lot of
Mhm.
walking back to the spout. right? To figure out where all these kinks are.
I
So for some of
know.
us, those kinks are close by. I can just, all right, that's 5 years ago. That was my marriage last year. That was my wedding. Some of us is a long walk back to the house, back to the
That's
nozzle.
okay. And we
Yeah,
could just take it one hole at a time, right? Because look, little we work on it little by little, a little
yeah,
bit more water is going to be coming out. It's not going to
exactly.
be as slow. So, I want to give people hope
Oh
that,
no,
like, yeah,
so-
it's gonna be a long walk, but it's gonna be a different walk because now you got a plan and you're not just like operating the same. You're like, oh, okay, I know what I need to do. It's gonna take some time, but let me do it.
and so for to put that, and also why it's to be optimistic, you're walking back to the spot. Well, we stay on this analogy. You're walking back to the nozzle slowly, trying to
Hmm.
find all the kinks in the hose.
Yeah.
Once you've undone the kinks, you're going to run back to the nozzle that's got the pressure washer on it.
Hmm.
So the rate of speed it takes you to get back to undo the kinks is it's going to be a process. But when you finally get them done, the rate that it gets you back to where you can start functioning is going to be
It's
a lot
different.
shorter.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, it's
it's
so
not going to be
different.
the same process. Once you're, because then you're going to be excited. Like, I finally got
Uh-huh.
water. Like you're going to feel
Uh-huh.
the hose that's bold. Like you're going to feel like I'm ready to do something. I can finally wash the car. Like I finally get this roof knocked out. Like it's going to be it'll be excitement. And a
That's
lot of that
good.
energy that's been gone, because it's like, man, if I had to spray the house with a drinking fountain drizzle, why would I be excited about that?
Right,
It would
right.
seem daunting, it would seem overwhelming, it would seem, pointless.
Yeah.
But when you've got full pressure and you're ready to go, now you're ready. You're ready to do the house, the car. You're gonna water the grass with it. Let me get this sidewalk real quick. You ask your neighbor, you want me to get that for you over there? Like, knock that fence out. Like you get a lot more energy, a lot
So
more
much
enthusiasm in what you have to do.
yeah, so much production in life in all of the areas. So so that's good. So we're identifying and we are looking at some of the kinks and things like that without judgment, right? If we're looking at our habits and the ones that we're identifying that's not working for us, really taking intentional time to work. I think the intentional part, not think, I know intentional part is important
Yeah,
because I tell people it's like when you're trying to create changes in your life, your system kind of goes through this like fight mode with you. You feel like you're in a battle. It's because it's not familiar with um the old system. I
yeah,
just spoke to somebody who said they know somebody who had a liver transplant, and they kept the old one in to see how it functions while they put the new one in. And there's like it's a long road ahead.
yeah,
And I think that's, and I don't know. Eventually, they're going to take out the old one probably and leave the new one in. But it's important to understand that just because we recognize the kinks
yeah,
doesn't mean our system is ready for it to change, and it'll be
yeah.
hard.
Yeah, we've created a whole world based around the drizzle. We based the whole world based around that hose that's just dribbling water out. So what we'll do is compensate. So if I know that this hose does not kick out a lot of water, I'll put buckets around to fill up the water on the slow drip, so I have enough water to clean off what it is that I need to clean. We'll put a whole bunch of systems in place, coping mechanisms to adjust for whatever's happening. So, well, if all of a sudden the pressure washer works like it should, you don't need the buckets anymore. But there's a part of us that can't let go of the buckets because in our mind, we believe we need the buckets. And so it's like, okay, all these 5-gallon buckets everywhere. I get it before because there wasn't enough pressure. So you need to fill them up with water to use it. The buckets are no longer required. And we know people like that, like, okay, that's not your situation anymore. Yeah, but I'm just gonna put these buckets just in case. I'm just gonna put them right here, just maybe.
Well, think about it. If you're used to seeing those buckets every day and then you try to take one away, it's hard to, there's a hole there. There's something there where you're like, whoa, how is this going
Yeah,
to work? Right. So it makes sense, when you think about, and I try to educate people about the process because it can feel daunting and it can
yeah,
feel hard. But when you really think about it, if that's all you know all these years, and then you call yourself doing something different, regardless of if it's better for you or not, it's still a shock. A shock is a
yeah.
shock, right?
Oh yeah. There are those of us who grew up in a household where we used to use those butter containers that then they became
I did.
Tupperware.
Yep.
And back in 1986, that was maybe common.
Hmm.
We can actually have a full set of Tupperware in our cabinet, but we're still not throwing away used butter containers now.
Nope.
Like, okay, you understand the reason why they use the butter containers because they didn't have Tupperware. Okay, well,
Right.
you've got Tupperware, so you don't need to keep the butter containers anymore. And
Right.
so, and so, but some of us were just like, we just can't let go of something.
Or
Now
plastic bags.
we don't have cabinet space anymore
Right.
because we're filled with Tupperware and empty butter containers. It's like we can't put other stuff in there. And so it's like, okay, I need to understand this was why those butter containers were used before. That
Yeah.
is no longer my existence. I have Tupperware now.
Hmm.
I can throw the butter containers away.
Hmm.
I can let them go. It will be okay.
Hmm. That's good.
You know.
And I think that even though it's like it can be hard and daunting when we're just doing it on our own, and let's say we're working through it, another piece of this layer of like really trying to work through changing some of the old habits is
Yeah.
maybe if those old habits benefited people in your life.
Yeah.
Tell people about that process and how like that can be hard when the person that you may have allowed, like you're allowed to um, have access to you in a certain
Yeah.
way, and a lot of those habits don't work for you anymore. It's going to be a struggle.
Yeah. So these analogies too. Do you ever remember the old show Gilligan's Island?
Yeah, a long time ago,
Okay.
golly.
You gotta be a little long in the tooth to remember that. Some of y'all may need to YouTube it if you're a little younger. And it was about these 7 castaways who went out. It was a 3-hour tour. The little boat got hit. They ended up stranded on this island. There was a professor, the skipper, Gilligan. It was a movie star, a rich couple, all that stuff that was on there. Well, every episode they were trying to figure out a way to get off this island, and they would come up with a viable plan. But usually Gilligan, kind of like the fool that was on the show, would do something that jeopardized the plan. So these people were stuck on the island because they couldn't leave Gilligan. And so if you left it up to the professor, he came up with a new idea every week. And right when it was time to go, Gilligan would fall on something, punch a hole in something, break something, do something, and the whole group was left on the island. At some point, we have to leave Gilligan. Even if it's to get off the island, to get saved, to then come back and get him with the proper resources. But for some of us, we're just like, nah, we just gonna ride this out together. These bad habits, these bad coping mechanisms, these things that have me in this space that's stopping my healing process with these people because of whoever they are to me. We got stuck on the island together. So we ride together, we die together. Like we just going we bad coping mechanisms for life. And so sometimes we have to look at, okay, I cannot heal with you. I can't get off this island with you. I can talk to you about the plan. We can try to get it together. But if you're either unable or unwilling, I may just have to leave and then send help to come back and get you. But I need to get off this island for me. I got a whole life that I left behind that I can't. There's a whole life waiting for me that I will not have access to as long as I'm joined with you at the hip.
Hmm. And that part, there's a whole life that you have access to. Like understanding why you're doing it is a
Yeah,
nice way to keep yourself going with
yeah,
consistency, because you won't always be motivated to change, especially when it gets lonely and it feels lonely,
yeah,
and you're going through this process, and you're trying to create new community because the old community doesn't work no more. And I always say it's not that people are bad, it's just that they
yeah,
have they have been a part of a life that was not who you were.
yeah,
Right. And so like learning who you are and really doing things for you, and changing your habits to create habits that's going to work for the direction that you're going. You got to know where you're
exactly.
going. That is, it happens that way, where you have to keep going. You can choose to stay, but knowing, like, if you choose to stay, that you may always feel uncomfortable in life. And yes, it still feels uncomfortable to create change, but that uncomfortability won't feel the same as you're pressing forward.
Yeah. And if you choose to stay, you have to rectify with yourself
Mhm.
that you cannot, then resenting them is not okay.
Yeah,
So if you choose to stay on the island because you can't get all of them off the island together, you can then no longer blame Gilligan for why you're still stuck on the island. So if it's a family of dysfunction, if it's problematic relationships and friendships, if it's certain things that you are trying to get yourself in a better situation, it is no longer their fault. That makes
And
sense?
it makes sense.
Yeah.
When you said that, I typically see this a lot with parents or
Yeah.
family, where when I have adults that are really trying to live their life and trying to compromise and do what their parents want, even though they're not in the same house. They're not the client isn't doing anything wrong. It's just not in the direction the parents want. And I'm clear. I said, if you choose to keep going in that direction, like you cannot resent this person for like wanting you to do something you don't want to do.
Right.
Like the relationship gets dysfunctional because you're being combative, but you're still compliant.
Yeah.
And so like understand that even if you're not compliant and doing things that the people in your life are doing, that it can still feel hard. But the resentment stuff, a lot of people are struggling with resentment, but nobody's made you do it. I'm not talking about
Okay.
people in like domestic violence situations. I'm talking
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
people like how their own free will, but are feeling trapped by whether it's societal pressures or pressures from their family. Understand that it's your life, right? Like you have to figure out what it's going to look like for you so that you're not carrying on this pain of like choosing something that really you didn't want.
Yeah. And you're not preserving the relationship.
You're really not.
Yeah, but the belief is if I comply with their wishes, it's to
Mhm.
keep the peace, so it will make them happy. But the underlying resentment you have with them for living the life that's not authentic to you, it's just it's fragmenting and destroying the relationship anyway. So
Exactly.
yeah, you're not saving the relationship by going along to get along.
Mm-mm.
So it at least then to say if we're going to have a fragmented relationship, at least let me live the life on my terms.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know,
That's so much
as a
better.
yeah, as opposed to thinking that we're doing something, grandiose and I'm
Mhm.
looking out for my mom or my dad or whatever. Yeah, but it's why you don't visit. It's why you
Exactly.
30 seconds you're on the phone, you're trying to hurry up and hang up. It's
I
why
know.
them visiting gives you anxiety and stress. Like it's you're not saving the relationship is
Mm-mm.
what that
And
is.
and that peace and happiness is an internal job, right?
Yeah,
And there's a lot of people I know that are not out here robbing and committing crimes,
yeah.
right? They're doing fine there, but it's not what their parents may have wanted. So I really want to encourage people to think about that. What Jermaine said, a great point. You're not saving a relationship because what I've found is that there's always something. It's never ending. You go and be a doctor or whatever, and there's something else. You're not having a kid fast enough. You're not putting them on
Always something.
this fast enough. So it's kind of
Or who
like
you
at
had the
some
kid with,
oh, who
or
you have the kid with, who you
who's you
with, yeah.
married? What city you live in? You chose that school instead of that school, but I'm still a
Mhm.
doctor. Yeah, but you're not a doctor from such and such. You know, there's always something.
Yeah, and
And
I always say like that's probably due to the fact that it takes the pressure off of them looking at their life, right? Like the parent or whoever. When people have so much to say about what you're doing, especially if you're not out here robbing and killing people,
yeah.
when they have so much to say, it's kind of like they don't have to look in the mirror.
Well, also we have to remember too, the more successful our children are, the more our decisions are justified.
Mm.
So if I raise a daughter who's pre-med and who's, a full-fledged surgeon by 27 and is this, that, whatever, that validates every decision I made as a parent.
That's true.
so, so it's like, you can't tell me nothing. I got a 27-year-old neurosurgeon. Don't tell me about who I dated. Don't tell me about what moves I made. Where's your 27-year-old neurosurgeon? You know what I mean? Like, so if our children are super successful, it washes everything we did. So sometimes that push is not as about them as some of us like to present. I just want what's
Mm.
best for them. Because if you raise somebody who's certain addictions or who's the person who is robbing and stealing, whatever, the first thing look at who raised you.
Right.
What environment were you in? What type of parent were they? What access did you have to what types of things, and what were you involved with? And then you've got to justify all your moves as a parent.
And sometimes that's not even the issue. It wasn't even about,
Yes, I'm saying, but
but
if your kid's on TV for as a bank robber, the first thing is, where's mom at? Who's the daddy? But if your kid's on TV accepting winning 13 Grammys that night, oh, see, you did right.
that's
But but all that to say, so to get started, because because there's the part that goes with that is, so if we acknowledge that we're having something with our system and we need to make these changes, that first step. So there's a practice called from zero. So there's the practice of from zero. And so for somebody, we do those Fitbits, it was 10,000 steps a day. The hardest step is not 9,999 to 10,000. That's not the hardest step. And it's not even, 7,103 to 7,104. The hardest distance is from 0 to 1.
Yeah, that's true.
It's getting out of the bed, putting on our shoes, and going to the gym. It's not working out from minute 30 to minute 45 once you're
Mm-mm.
there. It's how did you actually get out of bed, lace up your Nikes, and get out the front door? So it's from zero. So there's a lot of us who, when it comes to this period of wanting to make these changes, we've acknowledged that things are going on. It's that first step.
That's such a good point. Even just getting up in the morning and me going things I love doing, hiking and different things. Sometimes I'll be like, oh, you could get an extra bit of sleep, but I always think about what's my goal. Like I know when I leave and when I finish, I'm like, oh, it feels so good. But once I start, it's like I'm fine.
Yeah.
It's just, and as we're talking about like creating new habits, really understanding that there's this dialogue that can happen where you can actually like speak to those thoughts, because I
Yeah.
do that all the time where I'm like, no, I know my goal, like I know what I'm trying to do, like I'm gonna push out of the bed, and
Yeah.
the bed feels good. I'm not gonna sit here and say like I just jump up and I'm ready to go. Like, no, I would rather sleep.
Yeah.
But then I know like sleeping is not getting me to my goal. So then
Yeah.
I like remember my why. And so, like, as you're trying to create these new habits that maybe the spring has put this little umph of like energy in you, like, understand that those thoughts are happening and you have to work on changing the narrative in your mind.
Yes. Because we are creatures of habit, path of
Hmm.
least resistance, lowest common denominator. So if we fall into a system of doing something, you're going against the grain to make changes, even if those changes are better for you.
Yeah, so true.
So getting up at 5 a.m. to go work out and all that, ultimately, yes, I'll be healthier. I'll be get on top of this type 2 diabetes. I'll release this high blood pressure or whatever it is that's going on with me. I know it will be more beneficial, but I haven't gotten out of bed at 5 o'clock in 15 years. Unless I was catching a plane, I'm not, I'm never out before the sun. We may have a habit of, or snooze is in the room with us. What do you mean? I'm hitting snooze like Barry Bonds is hitting balls. Like I just, you start that first alarm at 5 and you didn't hit, and now it's 6:15. Now you up at the last alarm. Just every 10, 15 minutes, you just keep hitting it. So getting in that first step of, okay, I want to start being better about my money. I want to be better about my health. I want to be better about the relationships that and the people I surround myself with. I'm gonna be better about the situations and the circumstances I place myself in. We can say this friend is not a good friend for me, but that first step, it has to be maybe a conversation with that friend that we can't be friends anymore, or we can't be friends in this capacity. I can't do these things with you anymore. I can't, I know we used to go to the bar on such and such nights. I can't do that no more. Oh,
Yeah.
but come on. No, I can't go. Getting that first step and that practice of getting getting these changes. And so for some people, because this happens a lot of time too, we rely on motivation, and that could be problematic. So if you're looking to make the changes, it's going to be more based in habit than it's going to be in motivation.
Say it again, because people be thinking like, I don't have motivation. I'm like, it doesn't work
You
that
don't
way.
require it. Motivation is a bonus, but habit is a skill. So
Yeah.
motivation, if you can be motivated, that's a talent. That's somebody 6'6" who can just take off and jump from the free throw line without ever playing organized basketball. That's a talent. Being able to shoot like Steph Curry from half court, that's a skill. That takes constant work, constant honing in, constant being deliberate and intentional.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There two things I want to share. One, two different things that I would tell myself I'm not good at or can't do. So one is cooking. I always say like I'm gonna hire a chef because like, I didn't like cooking. And the pandemic happened, and I couldn't eat out like that. This is before people figured out a system, and I started going on YouTube. But also, I didn't tell it's important the way you talk to yourself as you're trying these things you don't
Yeah.
really feel like doing, because what I would start doing is playing music or playing a show while I'm learning. So I'm building it with the habit of something that I like or that I'm already doing.
Yes.
Right. And I'm mindful of that. Another thing I will always say, like, I don't know how people get up in the morning to work out, blah, blah, blah. That's crazy. But then like I got so busy, I recognized I would put things off. And not do what I need to do for myself, or to have this dialogue all day and then say the next day. And I said, I can't do that if I start in the morning, because I'm starting before I got whatever I need to do.
Exactly.
And now I do it, and I've been doing it for a while now, and it feels good, and I'm happy I did it. So what you tell yourself, like, even though I still don't like getting up in the morning, but it works for me because now there's no excuse for me not to do it later. This is just my personal like
Yeah.
situation. I'm not saying everybody has to do stuff first thing in the morning, but whatever habit you're trying to build, try to couple it with something that you like. Like, I'll put on Les Brown in the morning while I'm getting up, because he'd be like, get up, blah, blah, blah. And so I'd be listening to him. I'm like, you're right, Les Brown, I need to get my life together. It just motivates me, right? But that's like me. So when you find out what works for you, what you can couple it with while you're building in that new habit, it'll help with the transition you're trying to make.
Exactly. It's the practice of habit stacking.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
you take the one habit that you already have, and then you just continue to keep building upon. If you like, if music motivates you in the morning, so I get up and play music. While I get and play music, I vacuum.
Yep.
While you get up, play music, and you vacuum. Well, after I vacuum, I may go straight into Pilates in the living room, whatever it is,
Right. Right.
And
Whatever
so
you're
you
trying
just keep stacking these habits on top of each other to where they become more ritual based as
to do.
opposed
Exactly.
to how I feel about them.
Mm-hmm.
We don't think about putting on my sock than my shoe.
Or brushing our teeth or
None of those
showering. We
things.
just
It's
do
just a
it.
habit.
Yeah.
Like, if you videotaped yourself, this is a word for people. You brush your teeth the same way every day.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you start on the same tooth,
Mm-hmm.
and it takes you about the same amount of time. You have a habit of the way you brush your teeth
Mm-hmm.
that you give zero thought to.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think I need to start with this incisor today. Let me start with this bicuspid. No, you just I start right here, just go through. And once it becomes a habit, you don't even think about doing it. And
Mm-hmm.
so when it comes to making these changes in our behaviors, some of us have the talent of being self-motivators, of being able to spring out of bed and light switching it on to where I can feel kind of lethargic, quiet, and then I can just flip the light switch and just power up and just do it cold. Some of us have
Mm-hmm.
that talent. Most of us have to hone the skill. So most of
Mm-hmm.
us have to sit there and just, I got to put my 10,000 hours in about how to get
Mm-hmm.
myself in the habit of doing this.
Mm-hmm.
So if it seems like it's hard in the beginning, if you're trying to learn to play the piano, you can be as motivated as you want to play the piano. You're not gonna be good at it in 3 weeks.
Right.
You know what I mean? So you're gonna have to get in the habit of just getting out of bed when you set the time to get out of bed. Just getting in the habit of doing these things that don't necessarily feel like we've been doing them, and they shouldn't feel like the way we've been doing them, because we're doing something different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
Like
good.
the uncomfortable space is because we're actually changing.
Mm-hmm.
And so just getting in the habit of just getting up, regardless of how we feel about it. Getting in the habit of just start working out, just start walking
Feelings change, because the Jermaine said, regardless of how we feel, because feelings change.
all the
So
time.
that yeah, so it's important to just kind of remember that. I wanted to say something else about something. I should have wrote it down. Um, I hate when that happens. But I was just thinking about the habits. It's gonna come back to me, and just kind of doing it when you don't feel like it. It'll come back to me. But yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's good. That's really good.
Yeah, because motivation will come and go. That's not, if you're relying on motivation to get stuff done, you're almost setting yourself up for failure.
Hmm.
So it's the idea. It's the same reason why we budget our money. You don't
Hmm.
allot yourself a certain amount of money per month based upon how you feel. You allot yourself a certain amount of money based upon how much you make, based upon how much what you have to spend it on, what your actual overhead is, and what you're trying to save for.
Hmm.
So I don't, you know what I mean? If you saved based upon how you felt, most of us wouldn't have much of a savings.
Hmm.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And it's the same way goes for our time. If you budget your time based upon solely how you feel, a lot of stuff's not going to be getting done. A lot of stuff's going to get compromised and sacrificed. When you're trying to learn a new skill, it's why piano lessons are Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7 a.m. or at
That's
7
what I
p.m.
wanted to say. So like what Jermaine said, when some people may be able to spurt up and be fine, and some may need more work, just because everybody's different.
Yeah.
I find like art, some people don't even really practice piano. They learn how to play it
Yeah.
really quick by just listening.
By ear and just, yeah.
By ear. I'm somebody like I hear somebody's story and remember it, and like I have this skill set of being able to help people with getting unstuck. But then I'm not a good artist. There's other things that I'm not good at, right? So I just want people to not get discouraged. Maybe if like, because when I talk about myself, I try to talk about the hard stuff more
Yeah.
so than the stuff that comes naturally for me, just so people can know like we all have different kind of things that we may be better in than others, or
Yeah.
need more time working on than others, and that's okay. I've always been a slow learner, and even in boot camp, the last person to finish my PT run, last person to qualify. But I was like so determined. I had really good drill sergeants. That helped a lot. But it's important to just to know that like it may take you longer to complete something, and that's okay.
Yeah.
You are where you need to be. Yeah.
Yeah. And that all ties into is when we become self-aware.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
when we learn how we are, like I had to learn like communication. I speak and stuff all the time now, but I had to learn the way that I communicate. I had to find, that's why I speak with so many analogies and metaphors and stuff. I had to
Mm.
find a system that goes from the way it's in my brain to
Mhm.
how I can relay something to somebody else.
Mhm.
I did better memorizing song lyrics, movies, and TVs than necessarily quotes out of particular books.
Ah,
You know what I
yeah.
mean? So certain universal things, it was like, okay, for the way that I process information, this is the easiest way for me to relay what
Yeah.
I know to what somebody else can get.
Yes, yes, that's good.
You know, so I had to learn that for me because I have
Mhm.
a language thing. Like I always joke all the time, the language I tell myself is not the language I speak to other people in. And
Right,
so I
right,
had to
right.
find a bridge language that makes
That's so funny.
communication easier. And so, but if I'd have sat there and tried to memorize these passages from text and from particular thing, it would never work. So
Wow.
we just have to learn who we are as individuals and
Yes.
then put that system in place based upon who we actually are.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, when I was dating my husband and I would go to his college, I would be in the library for hours studying, and he wouldn't study and just go in. He finished his bachelor's in 3 years.
Yeah.
And just took 6 classes, never studied. And like what Jermaine said, well, you know who you are. So like for me, I always say like it takes me a little longer to do things, that's okay, but it's not like somebody's telling me and I'm feeling attacked.
Yeah.
Like if somebody were to say something to me, it would be fine because I know who I am. You can't tell me who I am because I know who I am.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is why the self-awareness is so important. So that you can like do it regardless of who you are. Do what you need to do for yourself. But I can put measures in place. Like I need to listen, take notes. I'm a note taker,
Exactly.
and read slower. Like the things I need to do, I put measures in place. I'm not like ashamed or embarrassed by who I am. But a lot of times, I went hiking today, and my shoes always untied, my hiking shoes.
Yeah.
And today I said, let me Google how to tie them correctly, because it has to be a method. And I found a method, and it stayed on even till I got home. Usually I'm like tucking them in and I'm aggravated, they're loose. And I remember on the YouTube video, a comment said, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe that other people have this struggle. I was almost embarrassed to Google this."
Yeah.
And I tell people, don't be embarrassed about like what you need help with, because it's not going to change if you don't get the help that you need. The shoe
That
obviously is a smaller example, but you know what I'm
no,
saying.
no, that is huge. This idea, there's almost 8 billion people
Hmm.
in the planet. We're not all on the same page, and we don't all figure stuff out at the same rate. We don't all
No.
know, what I mean? It's like I always joke, like my friends is like, so I'm slow. Like
Uh-huh.
I'm quick as opposed to fast. Like I have quick
Uh-huh.
like twitch motion for stuff. But if
Uh-huh.
you have me running, my friends always say you look like you're running in slow motion. Like I've never been a fast runner, ever. Ever. So, but and I don't really like running. I can do it, but I know health wise, but I'm like, I can walk forever. Like if I get out and walk, I could walk for miles and not even think about it.
Dang.
And so, but that's what I learned when I need to get out and do stuff. I can just go walk it. Running, like if you time anything on speed, I'm going to disappoint you if you put your money on me. I can't do nothing fast when it comes to running. But I know, so for me, I would get out and I can just go for walks. And so I learned that, okay, walking is what you need to do. Like walking is what you, for exercise, for patience, for meditation, for whatever. Walking is, I can be out there walking for hours. And that's what works for me. I've got, other people do other stuff, like figuring out who we are and what are these things that we need to do for us as individuals, regardless of, we have to trust our intentions for what we're doing more than
Yeah,
we're worried about somebody else's interpretation of what we're doing.
that's good. Yeah.
So if you're Googling or YouTubing how to tie your hiking boots, it does not matter what it looks like to somebody else.
For real.
Do you know what I mean? Like
Ain't nobody checking for me.
exactly. You know what I'm saying? Like, well, you had to Google for you to shoot? Yes, because it kept coming
That's
undone.
not exactly.
I mean, you had to go to marriage counseling to tighten up some stuff in your relationship?
Mhm.
Yes. You had to take a financial planning class to learn how to budget? Yes. You had
Yeah.
to take a writing class to learn how to better communicate at your job? Yes. Like, these are things that I needed to do to have the more fulfilled life that I want to have,
Yes.
regardless of what that looks like to you on the outside.
Yes, that's good.
So if going to therapy is how I'm okay and keeps me from swinging on you, you should be happy that I'm getting this couch time. Like if my meditation is what makes me more personable for us to talk, if me reading a
Yeah.
book is what brings me peace, if me going back to school, whatever the things are that we need to do as we make these changes, because we've identified that we need some kind of change. If that's hiring a nutritionist or a life coach, if that's getting a
Yeah.
therapist, if that's joining some type of community, or if that's going to church, if that's maybe falling back from church, if that's whatever these things that we need to do that we've identified would make us more okay. It does not matter the interpretation of somebody else. We just need to stick to the intentions of us trying to be healed and be better.
I love it. That's good. That's a nice way to end this segment. I love everything, the way you present things. It always comes out so well. And the pressure hose, I'm gonna start using that one, because I just pictured it in my mind as you were talking about it, and I'm like, that's essentially like what's happening. And there's ways to patch it up. There's ways to untangle it. We just gotta be willing to put in the work to do it, or we can just put in more work with trying to do life. Life can get challenging and hard, but we make it even harder when we keep going and we don't pause and we don't like release and we don't reconcile. We make it a lot harder. And it's not about like people have to go in a certain direction with the picket fence and all this stuff. It's just like, what does a direction look like for me? And most people are walking aimlessly and thinking they're unhappy because of something they don't have, because of, like you said, what the advertising does, right? It's in designed to have you feeling that way, and we fall right in alignment with the design, right, when we're not intentional. So I really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, I always do. And for those people out there who are dealing with the pressure hose, uh, two things. One, acting like those kinks aren't there is not going to help you,
Mm-mm.
nor is it judging yourself for the fact that they're there.
Mm-hmm.
So beating yourself up over their existence it's that's not going to help you either. So that's why it's the self-awareness without judgment. Admitting we have 32 kinks in this hose simply means we have 32 kinks to undo. It's
Mm-hmm.
not how many we should, or if we should have any at all, or they only have 3 on their hose, or they've got like, none of that matters. We have 32 in ours. So let's just work it
Yes.
on kinking our hose.
And I'll say that I finished my hike a lot quicker because I wasn't stopping every few minutes to tuck in my sneakers. I was like, I
More
can't believe
water coming out the hose. See, once
I
you like
know
unkink
it
that
worked
one thing, just
out. I was like, there has to be something I can find. I'm like, oh, there's a bunch of people looking for the same thing I'm looking for.
that's really life is. All that stuff we think we're the only ones. You'd be surprised at how many people are on the exact same
Uh-huh.
struggle.
So be fearless. Just keep pushing. Don't care what it looks like on the outside because you're the one living the life, not the outside people.
Exactly. Exactly.
Tell people how they can find you if they want to do the disc assessment. Jermaine's been he talked about it at the beginning, but like there's a self-awareness where it shares with you like kind of who you are in your natural state, who you are under pressure. But if they wanted to like look into that and the program that you have, how could they reach you?
Couple ways. So number one, always the direct email. Well, actually, no. Since the last time we talked, I actually finally put this website together. So
You have a website?
finally built it. So it should be launching
Oh
by the time
wow.
this thing comes out. Yeah. So
Congratulations. I think how long have I been talking about a website since was
oh
it
my
last year or the
goodness.
year before
I
last?
I've been so behind.
Congratulations.
Yes, and for the people who are just like, why is the website? I've really been working a lot off of word of mouth and referrals, so I didn't. The
Mhm.
website wasn't super important, but I realized things are growing. So it's mykeystome.com.
Okay.
So MYKEYSTOME, mykeystome.com, and that's the uh, coaching consulting program. Learning about the different like how we operate. That's they go to that website. We'll set up. You can set up to doing a 15-minute consultation to talk about what the assessment is and how it works and all the different coaching programs and all that stuff. So mykeystome.com. Every social media platform is the same at J Morris CEO.
Dang, I think I'm more excited than you are. This is so exciting for me. Because I'd be like trying if it's people don't listen to the podcast, I just be trying to talk about you, but not really know how to like. I'd be like, it's this thing you do. But obviously, people that listen to us like kind of like know who you are.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm really excited about this. This is so exciting. So the next time we meet, you got to put that website on your little screen so that
Yes.
on your name so that people can know how to contact you.
I will definitely do that.
All right. Thank you so much. And we will see you guys next month.
Yes.